as is well known, young women in particular have moved very decisively to the left in recent decades. Some people assume that this is because some conservatives assume that this is because women are somehow temperamentally inclined towards being leftist. I don't think that's true. I don't find that very convincing, not least because women have historically played important and interesting roles in various right-wing movements. But clearly there's a tension there, and I think it's an interesting tension and one that you think about a lot.
Yeah, I mean the piece itself is affectionate and tongue in cheek, and I'm not really, I was stereotyping outrageously, and I'm sure everybody's just going to look at it and say, "Yeah, I'm several of those categories, and actually I'm none of them." And anyway, this is outrageous. Stop that. I wrote it partly in response to a lot of discourse recently about women and the right, which has been prompted by, prompted just by the roiling, the magic 8 ball of discourse settles on various different things at different points, and periodically it comes back to the men and women thing, and every time it seems to get more bilious. But there have also been some interventions in the discourse recently by high-profile women who are right-coded, who are growing exasperated with a certain very hostile undertone, and it's left me mulling a question which I come back to often, which is there even a place for women on the right? And in as much as I've written anything at all comprehensive about this, it's ended up coming back to the question. It depends a bit what you mean by left and right. And I mean, in as much as I managed to make any sense of what we're actually talking about when we talk about left and right, there's a whole sort of ideological superstructure. But in as much as there's a material substrate to that, it seems to me that left, actually, broadly speaking, cashes out as the kind of technological change which dissolves things, which dissolves social and cultural and political norms, which managed things that we thought previously were given. Sorry, maybe I need to unpack that a little bit more in order for it to make sense. So if you imagine, there's something there's something that people shrug their shoulders at and say, well, that's just life, that's just how things are, and we just have to make the best of it. When you come across a thing which everyone disagrees is part of life, and that's just how things are, and we might not like it, but we just have to make the best of it. Humans will generally will find ways of rooting around it or managing it, or take, for example, at least until approximately the 1960s, the fact that only women get pregnant, and the fact that if you're having sex, there's a reasonably high chance you're going to get pregnant. This was something. I mean, this is the sort of paradigmatic example which I talk about a lot in my work, but it's an incredibly important one. And this immense shift happened that you and I both, in different ways, discuss in our writing, where a technology came along which transformed that, and something which was previously seemed given, and on the basis of which a huge number of social and cultural moral codes effectively developed, and in different ways according to class and culture and geography and so on. But previously everyone needed to manage socially the fact that only one sex gets pregnant. After that, it seemed, you and I both in different ways discussed the fact that seemed and is are not quite the same thing where birth control is concerned. But it seemed as if we'd found a technology which just dissolved that and made it seem and made it no longer relevant. It made it something which was within our control rather than something given that we just had to accept and accommodate through social technologies. So that's one example, but I can think, the onward march of technology from the beginning of modernity is the story of changes like that. And broadly speaking, what we think of as left is an ideology which emerges out of the theoretically limitless onward progression of those changes. Is my less ideological way of making sense of what's going on there. And right is a set of rearguard actions that says, no, actually, we shouldn't jettison the social technologies just because it seems like on a purely technological basis we can. In fact, they came freighted with moral considerations and intuitions about human nature, and intuitions about things that actually in reality we can't change, for example. That we can't just jettison like that out of this sort of tech-enabled hubris. Very crudely, I think you could characterize the left as the kind of the enthusiastic relation to that ongoing process of dissolution and reimagining, and the right as as a sort of rearguard action and a note of caution. But equally, the right has tended to be in its own way bound up within that onward march of technology. It's very rare to find a conservative who's so radically conservative that they just want to jettison the whole technological paradigm. I mean, that doesn't even describe me, and I call myself a reactionary. So, so I mean, and this is an incredibly roundabout way of answering the question. What are women doing on the right? But I think for me, what it cashes out as is a question about, what is a sane and sensible relationship between women and technology. And I think the answer to that question changes over time. I mean, the argument I made in Feminism Against Progress was that for a long time that the relation between women and technology has been overall a very positive one, at least when you look at bourgeois white women in the developed world, because by and large it's been a net benefit to us to be freed from what were previously quite constraining limitations on our behaviour and social expectations and what we could or were permitted to do. But more recently, that picture has got a lot more ambivalent once you get into the transhumanist era, which is really where we've been for the last few decades. And at that point, the picture becomes a lot less clear, really, who's still net beneficiaries and who isn't. Just to break that down a little bit more, if part of the question is, what's a good relationship going forward between women and technology, a second part of that question might be, what's a good and sensible relationship between the right and technology? How do we need to be thinking about it? Because certainly, just to undermine my own argument there, one of the most interesting subcultures on the right that I've been tracking recently is what I think of as right progressives, which is to say, people who've broadly embraced the kind of the optimistic, forward-looking paradigm for technology, but without the egalitarianism, which that optimism, the left-wing version of it, generally brings with it.
Mm.
So really, is there a place for women on the right? Yes, but it's a bit ambivalent, and it depends which tribe you're talking about on the right. It depends a great deal on that tribe's relationship to technology, and it depends a great deal on what women themselves are expecting. I mean, all of this is kind of, it's a much more theoretical level than the discourse which happens on the internet, a great deal of which, cashes out at a much more simplistic level as you're not allowed in our treehouse and you're spoiling everything, which is very much more, but it's less to do with politics in the real world and is more to do with, how, group formation and identity formation online, and specifically within the online sphere. And the piece that I wrote about the women of the e-right is much more oriented towards that kind of the kind of right-coded internet subcultures, and it's playful in that sense because a huge amount of what's going on within those discourses really is, it's not massively closely connected to the material world and to money and power and so on. Some to an extent, it's people having fun on the internet, and I don't really see that as a criticism as such. It's just people having fun on the internet. And should men and women have fun together on the internet? Again, is another interesting question. To what extent does the internet sex segregate? I've previously made the case for some measure of sex segregation on the internet, and of just not trying to join the boys in their treehouse. I mean, that's very much my personal view. That I don't I don't want to be invited into the treehouse. They're welcome to it. It probably smells in there. Just whatever. But there's a range of views on that, and sometimes the sort of border skirmishes can be quite unpleasant.